Hello and welcome to Health Professional Radio. So glad that you could join us for another segment. I'm your host, Neil Howard. We'll be speaking with Dr. Ilias Alevizos this morning, Executive Medical Director, Clinical Development at Horizon Therapeutics. He's going to talk about some data from the Phase 2 trial results on Dazodalibep for 2 Sjögren syndrome populations. Welcome to Health Professional Radio, Dr. Alevizos.
Thank you for having me.
Well, tell us just a bit about yourself and give us a description or some insights into what Sjögren syndrome is.
I have been working in Sjögren syndrome for several years. In my previous career, I was at the National Institutes of Health running the Sjögren syndrome clinic and having a lab focusing on Sjögren syndrome. I have been working on the Dazodalibep program for the past 5 years, and I have been part of Horizon Therapeutics, and I'm very glad to be here today discussing the results of Dazodalibep with Sjögren syndrome. So Sjögren syndrome is an autoimmune disease affecting primarily women. It's a chronic systemic autoimmune disease. The exocrine glands, such as salivary glands or tear glands, are primarily affected. However, several organs or other functions, such as sexual function, can be affected. Pain, dryness, and fatigue are the cardinal symptoms of this disease. So the symptoms that the patients face are debilitating, and they greatly impair the quality of life. One of the most significant complications of Sjögren's is the increased risk of non-Hodgkin's B-cell lymphoma, which occurs in a frequency of 5 to 15% of the patients affected by Sjögren's.
How rare a disease is Sjögren's syndrome?
So Sjögren's is not considered a rare disease. There are several estimates out there. The Sjögren Syndrome Foundation believes there's more than 1 million patients in the U.S. And part of the lack of good epidemiological data is that we didn't have an ICD code, and it was not very well recognized, the disease. However, over the last few years, Sjögren's has been really recognized, and we see that the incidence and the diagnosis is increasing.
2 of the most common symptoms are dry eyes and dry mouth. Has Sjögren's been subject to widespread misdiagnosis?
That is a possibility. That is very likely what has been happening. So the dry mouth and the dry eyes are not just a symptom of Sjögren's. However, because of several medications affecting dryness, it has been underdiagnosed. I think it's with the improvement in labs and the improvement in awareness of Sjögren's is that now physicians do test for the common autoantibodies, anti-Ro, anti-La, and there's many more biopsies happening, minor salivary gland biopsies. So the diagnosis is improving and increasing significantly over the last years.
Now, I understand also that there's some Phase 2 trial data that was presented at this year's EULA. Is that correct?
Yes, this is correct.
The study was in 2 populations of Sjögren's syndrome. Describe the differences between these 2 populations, if you would.
Yes. So we believe that Sjögren's patients can be defined into 2 different populations. So population 1, what we call in the trial, is composed of patients with moderate to severe systemic disease activity, which is defined by a score. It's called ESTA score, more or equal than 5. And population 2, which comprises the majority of Sjögren's patients, are patients with primarily symptomatology, like unacceptable symptomatic burden, which is defined by a score of ESPRI, more or equal than 5. ESPRI is a composite index capturing dryness, pain, and fatigue, and it's a scale of 0 to 10. So an average of more than 5 is the target population we had for that trial, for the population 2 of that trial.
And what were some of the results? Was there anything that was particularly surprising, or did they go the way that you expected them to go in both populations?
I think personally speaking, they went better than I expected for the symptomatic burden patients. We were hoping to see an improvement. The improvement was really great and impressive for these patients. And it's the first trial, actually, having an improvement in both symptomatic burden and moderate to high systemic disease activity. So both populations met the primary endpoint. For the population 2, at week 24, we saw a very robust improvement in SP score, statistically significant improvement compared to placebo. But we also saw a lot of the secondary endpoints hitting statistical significant measurements, other measurements of dryness, fatigue and pain, as well as quality of life improvements. So that was very, very promising and very exciting time for us to see all this improvement. And I think, as I said before, it's the first time any trial hits on these endpoints successfully.
How does this molecule actually work in these individuals?
So Dazodalibep is an investigational CD40 ligand antagonist. That molecule blocks the T and B cell interactions. So CD40 ligand is a part of a key pathway playing a very important role in driving immune responses. So, for example, when external invaders enter the body, this pathway is required to form germinal centers, which act as a defense system and produce the antibodies. However, there is an overactivation of this pathway in autoimmune diseases that leads to a constant churning of autoantibodies that attack the body. This is a hallmark characteristic of of all the autoimmune diseases, such as Sjögren's or rheumatoid arthritis. So the way Dazodalibep works is blocks this CD40 ligand and decreases the overactivation of this pathway, and eventually leading to a shrinkage of the germinal centers and reduction of autoantibody levels.
Doctor, is there anything that you'd like to add for our listeners, and then give us a website where we can learn more about Horizon Therapeutics?
Yes, the website is horizontherapeutics.com, and you can find more information about the molecule, and you can see some press releases with data, also links to the publications. So I want to say that we are very, very excited, and we hope that there's going to be some hope for the Sjögren's patients. There's more trials from other companies, other pharmaceuticals. Speaking like a person working with Sjögren's syndrome for many years, it is a very exciting time for the patients, and I hope there are going to be several successful products to make sure we can tackle this disease. This is underserved population, and it's a disease with unmet medical need. And I think it's a great time for Sjögren's patients.
We appreciate your work, Doctor. Thank you so much for your time this morning, and I'm hoping that you'll return as FDA approval becomes more visible.
Thank you so much for hosting.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with Dr. Ilias Alevizos. Audio copies of this program are available at healthprofessionalradio.com.au, also at Anchor, Spotify. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Health Professional Radio.